Hello crafters, this is Yana Smakula for SimonsSaysStamp.com. Welcome back for another Yippee For Yana episode. In today's video, I am creating an abstract encouragement card with Simon's Waves Builder stamp set. I love products that give me abstract looking images as I feel I can always get more use out of them. Here's a look at this stamp set. So this is a 6x6 cling background stamp, and all of these sections, all of these waves are separate. Yep, they've been pre-cut for you so you can easily stamp each wave or each section in a different color of ink without any masking. I'm going to remove the stamp from the backer sheet, place it inside my Misty stamping tool, and stamp a Stormy C. I've already removed the black foam pad from my Misty as I don't need it when I'm stamping with these cling rubber stamps. I figured I would stamp from the bottom up to make things easier, and I would remove the section immediately next to the one that I'm stamping and inking. I picked several colors of blue ink from Simon, starting from very light pale blue to very dark deep blue. The first color I'm using is Malibu. It's my favorite light blue ink from Simon. I'm inking and stamping this section, and actually all of the sections, twice or even 3 times to have perfect ink coverage. The paper I'm stamping on is Simon Says Stamp 120-pound cardstock. I seem to adore this paper for just about any type of project lately. It works great for stamping, for Copic coloring. It also works really well for foiling. Next, I'm going to pop the missing section back in, remove the section that I've already stamped, and then remove the section immediately above the section that I'm about to stamp. The color of ink I'm using for this next wave or this next section is Sea Glass. It's another very pretty pale blue. Once again, I ink up and stamp this section twice to have perfect ink coverage on my paper. I'm going to speed up the rest of the process and continue stamping my background. I'm making an A2 card, so my background is cut to 4¼ by 5½ inches. Now, while this stamp is called Waves Builder, you can easily adapt these shapes to create a pretty landscape. If you stamp the shapes in green, or perhaps even yellow or pink, you can create hills with flowers for your card. You can keep some sections blue to mimic sky. You can have one section light brown or light gray to mimic a road. Then you can have another section blue to have a river on your card, and then stamp the rest in various shades of green to create different looking backgrounds. Now, you also don't have to stick to any particular landscape. You can use these shapes just as abstract shapes and stamp them in a rainbow order, for example, or maybe an ombre. You can have an ombre pink or an ombre yellow or any other type of ombre. Here I'm using ombre blue, but that ombre blue is actually going to look like a Stormy sea. The stamp set name does suggest that those shapes are waves, but I encourage you to look at these in a different way. Do these shapes remind you of anything else? Can you combine them in a clever way with other stamps from your stash? So take a look, and I'm sure you're going to come up with some really fabulous ideas. Next, I used Audrey Blue. The next section was stamped in High Dive. Next, I went a little bit green with Simon's Teal ink. Next, I used Simon's Sea Glass, and finally, Soft Navy inks. Now, the very top section was stamped using a combination of soft navy and teal. I first stamped that section in one color in soft navy, and then added the other color teal on top to create a different tint to that last piece. So here's a look at this background. I really love the way it turned out. In my head, this looks very much like a stormy sea. Now, you can use this background either way. I do want the top of the background to be the darkest, but you can flip it and have very light blue skies instead. To add a focal point to my card, I used an older stamp set from Simon called Your Light. I stamped a lighthouse in Memento Tuxedo black ink onto the same Simon's 120-pound cardstock using my Misty tool. Now, I love the style in which this image is illustrated, or this entire stamp set is illustrated. I think it is simply stunning. Next, I used some of my Copic markers in color the lighthouse blue and white. The colors I used are B04, B02, B00, and B000. I added shading just to the right-hand side of the lighthouse. I kept the darkest blue on the right and the lightest blue on the left. I also used B000 marker to color the waves under the lighthouse very light pale blue. Now, to color the stones, I used cool gray markers. I first used just the C5, C3, and C1, and I also used the same colors to add shading to the white areas on the lighthouse. I wanted the lighthouse to be white and blue, but you can't just have a white section. You do need to add a little bit of shading to help it appear dimensional. Now, brown markers were used to color the fence by the lighthouse, and I went with E37, E33, and E31. The light inside the lighthouse was colored using Y17 and Y08 markers, and I also colored the windows yellow to have them appear lit. I did intensify the shadows on the stones using C9 and C7 markers. I basically made the stones a lot darker. Now, these cool gray colors aren't the best choice for coloring stones, but it worked for this card. This image is pretty small, so there's not much coloring and not much shading to be done. Next, I used a coordinating die and I cut the lighthouse out in my die cutting machine. Next, I also die cut a sentiment strip from Simon's Reverse Sunshine and Rainbows Sentiment Strips set. And I used a black marker, a Copic marker, to color the white edge black. I remember this tip from Sherry Carroll, and it does make a world of a difference. I also die cut 4 blank lighthouses from some scrap white cardstock, and I used those to add dimension to my main die cut. Now, you could use foam adhesive. I prefer to die cut blank layers. I love this trick. Now, this does make the card a bit heavier as you are adding some extra cardstock, but I personally do not mind. I used the Barely Art glue and I adhered all of those layers together. And here you can see how thick this die cut became. Next, I used Simon's Dot Runner adhesive and I adhered my stamped background onto an A2 white top folding card base. I made sure to double check so that the dark blue was at the top and not at the bottom of the card, as I do tend to mess up a little bit when I'm adhering my backgrounds onto the card base. I also adhered my lighthouse and I foam mounted my die cut sentiment. I also stamped some additional detail images from the Your Light stamp set. I added the lines symbolizing the light coming out of the lighthouse. And I also added a few seagulls flying in the sky. And I used VersaFine Onyx Black ink for this portion of the stamping. Lastly, I embellished my card using a few silver gems. I felt like silver went really nice with the different shades of blue. And the gems I used are from the Spellbinders Color Essential Gems set from the Silver Mix. So here's a look at the card I have for you today with the Simon Says Stamp Waves Builder Stamp Set. I hope this video has given you some ideas on how you can use this set, and I hope you feel inspired to create. Thanks so much for joining me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.